Our kids can be dismissed to go to Kids Corner. It's good to see all of you. Hope you're having a good week at school. If Michelle and I look tired this morning, we've had Mabel since Wednesday. There's a reason why you should have kids when you're younger. We've learned we have to be a little quicker. There she was right there. We were just talking to her, and then we turned around and she was at the top of the stairs. It doesn't take long these days. The car was a 1968 Buick Skylark. It was my first car. It was a convertible 1968 Buick Skylark. Now, while the convertible sounds all right, I have to tell you, rust had done its best to take a lot of the metal on the Buick Skylark away. And where used to be metal around the wheels was largely gone. And in the middle of this time of year, when it would rain, I would have to drive one hand on the wheel, forget the 10-2 position, because the other hand had a towel that I would hold up in the joint of the convertible top where a little hole had formed to keep the rain from inside the car. And so if you'd have saw me in 1981 or 1982 with my 68 Buick Skylark, you'd have seen me driving on a rainy day like this. And then to further complicate matters, if it was a cold, damp day where it was raining, after about 5 minutes, the car would be good, but the next stoplight, that choke would stick, and if I took my foot off the accelerator, it would die out in the middle of the intersection, and then it wouldn't start for about 10 minutes. So I had to learn, I had a towel up here, a hand right here, I had my left foot on the brake, and my right foot on the accelerator because I couldn't take it off the accelerator for fear that it would stall out. Now, for those 4 days in the summer when I could get the top down, it looked great. My friends, aware of all the things, the towel, the ability for the car to die out, all the rust, they had an affectionate name for my 1968 Buick Skylark. It was dubbed the Deathmobile. I longed for a car that had fewer impediments to drive than that one did. We live often with impediments in our life. And the question I want to ask this morning is, what kind of things hold you back? And I think there's often things in our life that act as drags, make life harder to navigate. I'm going to be reading out of Mark chapter 9, starting in verse 43. This is a very well-known passage. I got a few different things to say about it, but reading out of Mark chapter 9, it says, "If your hand causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life maimed than with 2 hands to go to hell, where the fire never goes out. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It is better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where the worms that eat them do not die and the fire is not quenched. Everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other." I'm going to stop there. This is one of those difficult passages. There's an important principle here, and we ignore it far too often. My mom, after a number of years, as a single mom in about 1976, got remarried, and my mom's second husband, Dave, had a boat. He loved that boat. And for the last few years of his life, he died relatively early. My mom and Dave had a place up on Lake Erie. It was actually a double-wide trailer, but it was their pride and joy, and it came with a boat slip. And so Memorial Day, he'd take his boat up and he'd stick it in his Boat slip, and it would stay there until September, and he would take the boat out. And when you took the boat out in September, the boat had to be cleaned. Because you'd be surprised what had attached itself or grown onto the boat as it sat in the lake for 4 months. Everything accumulated. Scum accumulated. Algae accumulated. Every year, not only did it have to be taken out of the water, it had to be thoroughly scrubbed before it was stored away. That's not the only time we do that. In a few years, we'll have the Olympics again. We'll have the Summer Olympics. And we'll have all those swimming competitions. You know that these swimmers shave their legs and every place. They don't want the slightest body hair anywhere because they're afraid even one will give them just a little bit of extra drag. They're trying to remove all the extra drag that they can. Runners get shoes perfectly molded to their feet. They don't want to wear socks, extra weight. They do everything they can. They're ruthless to take away anything that might cause them an extra thousandth or hundredth of a second. Me, I'm just as fast with thick socks as with no socks. Or should I say just as slow. Financial advisors. Some of you have a financial advisor. If they're good, they will seek every avenue they can to try to remove low-performing investments in order to improve your bottom line. If they get a percentage, actually to improve their bottom line, but they do that by improving yours. So the question is this morning, what places an impediment, a drag in your spiritual life? Is there a habit? Is there an attitude? Is there a person that pulls you away? Are we as ruthless with our spiritual extra weight as we would be with unneeded financial weight or unneeded athletic drag that would reduce our performance? And we think, no, I've avoided all the bad things. I can't think of a bad thing I do. I'm a successful bad thing avoider. So let me ask another question. Is there a good thing in your life that acts as a weight? We think, no, I'm not doing anything bad, but that was not my question. I didn't ask if there was something bad. I asked if there was something that was an undue weight. That is taking the place of Christ or taking the shine off your spiritual walk. I got a couple things I can think about right offhand. I know people that when they get on Facebook or social media platforms, it makes them grouchy. Actually, it kind of makes all of us grouchy. So that's a thing that we can avoid. The truth of the matter is God needs effective people. And when we live with impediments and when we're failing to clear the hurdles in life, we're not doing a good enough job. Even if there's something that we love too much. So are we effective? Here's some things that might limit our spiritual walk. First thing is, maybe it's a lack of reflection. We don't stop and listen for the still small voice enough. We have biblical stories. Elijah, who wanted to hear from God, and he was looking for God in the whirlwind, in the earthquake, and then it said it came a still small voice. But we live in a very loud world. A loud world that tends to walk around with earbuds in their ears. And it's hard to hear a still small voice when we're plugged in to something else all the time. Another thing that can limit our effectiveness is we sometimes allow bad habits to stay. Habits that we know aren't helpful. We allow other loves to remain. Things that we know take a little, raise our anxiety and take a little bit of our spiritual edge away. We allow other loves to remain. We love something more than we love Christ. We love something else more than we love God's people. And it doesn't seem, are you saying there's anything wrong with X? The answer is no, but that's not how we live Christianity. We just don't make a checklist of all the things that are bad and avoid them. And I know that's how most Christians live. That's not what we're called to do. You want something that makes us less ineffective? I got one. Unhappiness. I think God likes happy people most of the time. Sour attitudes make the world a worse place. Most Sundays, I'm going to come clean. Most Sundays, if you look right down here in front, I have a tin. And if you open up that tin is full of mints. I got wintergreen mints in there, I got cinnamon mints in there, I got peppermint mints in there. Because there's nothing that will take away your desire quicker than for onion breath to be breathing in your face. You don't want that. Most of us have a whole cabinet full. We have this spray, we got this cologne, we got this. We're trying to make everything as pleasing as possible. There's a part of our house, we have an ironing board. We don't even want a wrinkle. We don't want wrinkles to mark us when we go outside. We want to look pressed. We want to look neat. We want to look together. We want to have a pleasing aroma. When we walk past someone, we don't want people to go, ooh. We don't want to see that face. Worse than all of those things is someone that when they walk in the room sucks all the oxygen out of it. And you know those people. But Pastor, what if I'm not happy? First of all, I don't expect you to be happy all the time. First thing you can do is act happy. Are you saying I need to be less than authentic? Yeah, absolutely. If I'm in a bad mood, and all of a sudden you interact with me, you have nothing to do with my bad mood. My bad mood might be because of something that happened over here. Why should I take my mood out on you? Plus, often in life, actions go before feelings. We live in a world that wants to wait for the feeling and follow the feeling. There are times in life when the standard, the action, the right thing to do comes before our feelings. When I was younger, there are times I woke up, and you know what? My wife just bothered me. And I don't know why she was doing the things that she was doing to bother me. She shouldn't bother me like that. And as I got older, I learned something. It wasn't her, it was me. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I was just cranky. I was being irredeemable. Maybe there's times in life when the thing that I want to lead with is not anybody else's fault. And so perhaps I need to act like I want to feel. People look at me funny. This was years ago. Adam was in college and he had a phone interview coming out of college. He happened to be home. Might have been spring break. And he said, I have a phone interview. And it was with a company. And I said, all right. I said, I want you to do me a favor for the phone interview. And he goes, what? I said, I want you to put a shirt and tie on. I want you to put a shirt and tie on. And I want you to sit, not in a recliner, not on the couch. I want you to sit at the kitchen table on a wooden chair. And don't let your back touch the backrest. And I want you to have good posture and a shirt and a tie. And he goes, why? And I said, because you'll sound different to the person on the other end of the phone. Sometimes we have to lead with our actions. I'm called to love other people, even when I don't feel like it. I'm called to be grace and peace to other people, even when I don't feel like it. Here's another thing that ruins our effectiveness that sometimes we might have to remove. You ready? Isolation. There is almost nothing in life that isolation won't make worse. Go wall yourself off from other people, it'll tend to make it worse. Find someone else that loves you. Find someone else that will encourage you. Find someone else that will speak good things into your life. It's important. The truth of the matter is, we are our own biggest enemy. But here's how we think. Oh no, the problem's them. It's always them. If only he hadn't said that, then I'd be fine. If only she hadn't done that, then my life would be different. I'm sorry they did that to you. I'm sorry she said that to you. I'm sorry that happened. But at some point, when are you going to quit allowing what someone else did to affect you right now? Don't give them that kind of influence and power over your life. We blame everyone else. But it's always me. The truth of the matter is, I can never control someone else. The only person I can ever control is me. One other thing as well. The Christian should never use the excuse, the devil made me do it. Horse feathers. He might have given you a prompt. He might have asked you to go ahead, but you jumped in with both feet. Often the problem we have is we refuse to submit our lives to Christ and to the leading of the Spirit. In our small group Wednesday night, we talked about a story. You remember the story of Gideon. Israel is being overwhelmed by the Midianites. The Midianites were bigger and stronger, and they would come across with raiding parties and burn their crops and steal their livestock. And they cried out to the Lord, and they cried out, God, you have to answer our prayer. You have to protect us. And there's humor in the story. There's a little scrawny guy named Gideon. And God shows up. And Gideon says, God, you have to do something. Look what they're doing. You have to come in and make it better. And God shows up and says, greetings, mighty warrior. And Gideon, who you talking to? God said, you. And Gideon says, what am I supposed to do? And there's a line in that story, you can read it, in Judges. God says, go in your own strength. I find that fascinating. Most of the time we sit there and we pray, God, give me the strength, or give me your strength, which is not a bad prayer, but when God asks you to do something, it's because you're capable right now. The Spirit enables the willing. Go in your own strength. There's a choice we have. And it's kind of mentioned here. There's another, Mark he explains this a little differently than another gospel does. First thing he says is this. He says, everyone will be salted with fire. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt in yourselves. There was two different routes that Mark just used. First of all, there's two ways you can be an effective person. There's two ways you can grow. There's two ways you can become spiritually sharper, psychologically sharper, mentally sharper. The first way is just let life beat you about the head and shoulders. And learn the hard way. Just yesterday in our house, yesterday morning, we have these old metal doors into our closets that fold outward. And then you kind of push them in, so they kind of fold out. And Michelle was there. Mabel, don't push on that. Mabel, don't push on that. Mabel, don't push on that. Turned her head for a second. They look closed. There's still a little gap, but she happened to push right on that gap. And so that metal door pinched her finger. Guess what? She learned. It's one of those life lessons. But when that happens, and it can happen to all of us, life is a hard process. And you know a lot of people who have been through lesson after lesson in life and still refuse to learn. But there's another way. Have salt in yourselves. That's an interesting phrase. I think it means a couple different things. First thing, live with discipline. Live with a sense of purpose. Somewhere along the way, when I was in college, I was probably the last person that you would ever ask, would you please write an instruction manual on developing good study habits? I would not have been the person to ask at all. I live by the phrase, why do today what I could possibly squeeze in tomorrow if everything breaks my way? Fast forward a number of years, and I have a family, and now I'm doing master's work and doctoral work. It's interesting how much everything had changed by then. Outline things ahead of time, plan dates ahead of time, being sure I had a rough draft done, all those things. Discipline makes a difference. Purpose makes a difference. One of these will be true in every life. You'll either learn by observing the mistakes of others, you'll learn by just being observant and seeing what's out there, or you'll learn by letting life just beat you up. It's your choice. And there really is no other choice. I want to talk about one other part of this passage. I'm going to just stop just for a second. It's one of the things that makes me kind of grit my teeth a little bit. Mark, here in chapter 9, there's these three formula. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Now, this is where all the people who want to jump up and down and say you have to read the Bible literally, I'm encouraging you, please don't. Because the author has a different agenda here. He's not asking you to go get a hatchet and actually chop off your arm. He's trying to teach a lesson using very vivid illustration. It is better for you to enter life maimed than having two hands and go to hell. And he uses that word again. The word here is, literal word here is Gehenna. Let me talk to you about the Greek a little bit. Gehenna was an actual place. It is a valley on the southwest side of Jerusalem. It's a very steep valley. It had a very complicated history. If you want to go back to all the kings, if you go back to Kings and Chronicles, and they went to all the kings, this king was bad, this king was good. There were a number of kings that followed after Asherah, they followed after Baal. There was a god called Molech that they followed for a while. Let me talk about the god Molech. Molech demanded your first child as a sacrifice. And the kings were evil. They didn't do anything that they knew they should do, but they knew enough not to set up an altar to Molech in the temple, so they went to that valley, the Hinnom Valley, Gehenna, and they set up their altars. And the people take their firstborn, and they would throw the firstborn into a fire, because that's what Molech demanded. And it became known as this awful place where people followed other gods. And then as the years went on, it became this place where all evil happened and all the bad things happened. And it got to be kind of an apocalyptic way to tell a story. You'll be thrown into Gehenna. This is this metaphysical place. It also was a place when this was written that was a valley just right there. Gehenna is just on the other side of that wall. This is Jerusalem. Outside the wall, if I was people with leprosy or people who were unclean or people who were unfit to live in the community, they would force outside and they would try to eke out an existence in that valley. Here's why I'm saying that. When you encounter this word in Mark, it is a place with a past, it is a place with a present, And it is a place that hints toward the future. It is not just that, it is just not our modern conception of hell that's being talked about. Oh, you tell me if I do this, I'll take my risks. I got time. I'll make a decision later on. That's not what's going on here. This is a place that it's all-encompassing. Because I think what the author's trying to tell you, what Jesus is trying to tell you, when we make bad decisions, when we don't live life, when we don't surrender to Jesus Christ and His Holy Spirit, it's not just us, sometime in the future bad things will happen. Life starts to unwind now. Our own selfishness, our own pride starts to take a toll now. It's not that life will be bad later or I'll have to go to the bad place when I die. I'm not denying that thread in here, but I'm telling you this is a much more robust thing that's being described. I'm going to tell you the truth. There's probably a few here that won't like it. We often know the things in our life that need to change. We know. We also know quite well the things that God asks us to leave behind. We know it because we can't get away from it. We wake up at night, we're thinking about it. Our first thought in the morning, we know it. We go to pray for Aunt Margaret's infected toe, and that thought pops into our head. And we force it out so we can pray for her toe to get better. And God reminds us of this thing. We can't get away from it. We don't like it because change is not easy. And no one here, including me, said that change was easy. But there is a truth here. We often have not made a change simply because we don't want to. A lot of people don't make a needed change at this stage of life, and then maybe somewhere down the line there's a stroke or a stent or a bypass surgery, and all of a sudden later on the diet then changes. We don't change the work habits, and then 2 jobs later after being fired twice, well, we start to change it then. We get a brand new car, and we're proud of our car. And we've maxed out on the car, so we don't have any extra money. So we've used every dime for the payments. I don't need to change the oil every 5,000 miles. And then at 25,000 miles, the car breaks down. Then your next car, you start to do some different things. Change is never easy. But we often use the difficulty as an excuse. I want to go through these biblical characters. Abraham made a change and waited 25 years for the promised son to arrive. In the middle of that whole process, he goes, I know how we can jumpstart it. We'll do some things with my wife's handmaiden and all this stuff, and I'll get a son that way. Oh, that made it better. Moses made a change and wandered around for a while with people who were often rebellious. He never often saw the end of his faithfulness. Paul made a huge change, and it was career-ending. He was advanced. He was one of the leaders, and he made a change, and he lost his job over it and labored in obscurity for 12 to 15 years. No one trusted him. We think, oh, the Apostle Paul is a leader in the early church. No, he wasn't. Ever. Every time he went to Jerusalem, he started a riot. And when he finally went out on his missionary activity, it was the church in Antioch that sent him because the church in Jerusalem didn't want him going anywhere. Esther made a change and waited 5 years before she saw the fruit or benefit of the change. We live in a time where we think if we make a change now, everything will change. I'll see all these fruit. I'll see all this difference overnight, and that's not how it often works. We want to see the beginning, we want to see the middle, and we want to see the end before we choose to move, but it doesn't work that way. We are called to be faithful to what we know now. That's all God ever asks. Ever asks. But I know what He will ask from time to time. There's going to be a time, I don't think God will ever ask you to cut off a hand or a foot or pluck out an eye or anything like that. This is vivid illustrations for a vivid time. But He might say, I need you to leave this behind. I need you to change that. I need you to love this a little bit less. The question is, when He does that, will we be faithful and will we be ready? Michelle and I we moved over 2 years ago. And I'm not sure we did it in the right order. This was our move where we're supposed to downsize. And we didn't really downsize. Which means sometime in the future we'll have to downsize. We did get rid of a bunch of stuff. And since we have 2 kids with grandchildren, the kids have children, and we have grandchildren with both kids now. Our basement has now become a receptacle for stuff that they can't fit in their places. So we actually upsized, but with not our stuff. I don't know how that worked. There's a time in life for downsizing. After this winter, next May, some of you are going to go through a basement or go through a garage, and you're going to say, I have to have a garage sale. And though it doesn't sell, I got to take to Goodwill. Because your life is getting cluttered. The spiritual life gets cluttered as well. There's time to downsize. There's times we need simply to simplify.